Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this side event. This is an initiative that we decided to take us to share some of the main initial highlights from a joint rapid appraisal that we are doing in 3 continents. The organizations that are organizing this is, well, myself from IICA and FORAGRO, together with RELASER, that's the Extension Services Network in Latin America, the Asia Pacific Association for Agricultural Research Institutions, APAARI, the Asia Pacific Islands Rural Advisory Services Network, APIRAS, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA, and the African Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services. The first point in our agenda will be to share a little bit about the background on the exercise that we are doing at this point. And so I hand it over to Degi, who will present us some of the main highlights from this study.
Okay, thank you, Viviana. Julia, next, please. My name is Degi, Agriculture Extension Officer at FAO. Julia, you may go next. I will very quickly run down to the little bit background of this joint rapid appraisal and why we are here, sort of. So this joint rapid appraisal was done as an activity under TAP AIS DeSIRA Project for developing capacities in agriculture innovation system, scaling up tropical agriculture platform framework. And as by now you all know what that is, and you know, DeSIRA is a big European Union initiative, and there is a outcome supporting innovation systems and supporting TAP action plan, and in particular scaling up the common framework. This project implemented by FAO has 4 outputs, and output 3, as you can see in figure in front of you, focuses on the regional research and extension organizations and scaling up tools and approaches within and through those regional organizations. Next, please. And so very quickly, this project is a 5-year project implemented in 9 countries and 3 continents through the 6 continental research and extension organizations. Next, please. So just zooming into output 3, the objective of this output is to integrate TAP tools and approaches into research and extension organizations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, as I said. And our core partners are as listed here and mentioned by Viviana also. Through this output, we hope to strengthen the capacity and support the regional organizations, integrate these tools and approaches and use in their own programs and work in the region. And then also through these activities, we hope to facilitate and strengthen collaboration and synergies between research and extension organizations at the regional as well as national level. You know, still today we talk about the lack of linkages between research and extension, right? So we hope to also make some progress in this. And then this joint rapid appraisal was really a kickstart activity of this output. We carried out by those regional organizations. Next, please. So this joint rapid appraisal was carried out jointly by IICA with RELASER, APAARI with FARA, APIRAS with APIRAS. Yes, I just for the moment thought that we are missing one organizational logo in this slide. So the objective of the appraisal was to really stock take and examine the initiatives that's ongoing in the regions, really map out the landscape in the region in strengthening innovation systems or innovation processes, not really to look at what's happening out there, and then who's playing the key role and how it's been implemented. And then the final output of the appraisal will be the joint action plan between regional research and extension organizations also, and on integrating TAP tools and approaches. No, there was a methodology developed by NRI to carry out this joint rapid appraisal, including a descriptive study for using mixed tools, really a lot of mixed tools, online survey, key informant interviews, secondary information, and some cases stakeholder workshop when the restrictions and circumstances permit. Next, please. So just to mention a few principles that's used in the JRA, the joint rapid. This is a joint exercise between research and extension organizations, and we are using a common methodology across 3 continental organizations to be able to somehow compare and consolidate the results and draw common lessons from the exercise. And also in this process, we promote to use existing structures, not to create. This is also a little bit later on as well, and when we're having further interventions, to not to create new structure or new mechanisms, but rather work with strengthening and existing systems in place. And then the inclusiveness is very important, inclusiveness of the stakeholder groups. No, there are many different stakeholder groups are involved in innovation system, innovation processes, and there are different levels. So we are very mindful of that, and also territorial inclusion as well. And then, of course, the alignment with DESIRA overall objective. Next, please. So where we are, where did we start and where we are now is basically we start by developing a common joint rapid appraisal methodology, and which was done by NRI. And then we carried out the orientation training of JRA for the regional organizations, and regional organizations took off collecting data and analyzing findings. And we are almost at the final stage here in the end of the data collection. This is where we are now. What will be is to, it will inform the entry points for joint action plan, research and extension organizations, and also we will also put together the synthesis of this study, and will be disseminated publicly. No? So I think this is end of my presentation, I believe. And back to you, Viviana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Degi, for the summary. That's where we are. We're still working on finishing up the studies in each of the regions and getting together the lessons and everything. So that's why we decided to take advantage of this side event to be able to feed into that study a little bit with some inputs from the rest of the people that are not in the day-to-day working on the JRA. The first part of this session will have a sort of talk show format to present some of the highlights from the different regions, and the moderator will be Salvador. So I hand you the word, and you're in charge of the talk show.
Okay, thank you, Viviana, and thank you, Degi. I think this is first time I'm handling such a kind of a very intense talk show. I hope I can handle this properly. So just to introduce some rules of this talk show, maybe not more than 1 minute. The talk show will have 3 teams, and that means 6 panelists representing 3 RREOs. The objective of the session is to highlight some findings from the joint regional study on key lessons for strengthening agricultural innovation systems, as well as opportunities for institutionalizing TAP tools and approaches. The teams will have 3 questions each. So that means each team will have 3 questions. The team decide who is going to answer for which question. That is up to you. So responses from each regional team should be no more than 2 minutes. You please adhere to this 2-minute rule, which is very important among all, for a total time of about 20 minutes. And which will be followed by questions from audience for about 10 minutes. The talk show can conclude with a final key message from each of the regional teams, 2 minutes each, and you can still select one panelist among the 2. And then I will have 2 minutes at the end to summarize, if I'm able to get some points with this intense moderation. Okay, so with this, let's move on to the actual talk show. The talk show, so of course I already introduced the format. Let's begin with the first question. Could you please highlight the key lessons based on the regional study, the key lessons that you have learned or you have observed in strengthening the agricultural innovation systems? Can we pose this question first to team from Africa?
Okay, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Samson Shotu from African Forum for Agricultural Advisory Services, as working for AFAAS as capacity and institutional development specialist. I'm working from Addis Ababa. So I'm sharing the experience of Africa, which is conducted by FARA and AFAAS. So the key lessons is, in strengthening the agricultural innovation systems. Basically, for this joint rapid appraisal, FARA and AFAAS started working on the desk review, documented the different experiences of capacity development projects and initiatives in Africa. So we were able to find several cases in Africa. So the desk review from internet, which were very well documented. And what needed to be done was to apply the lenses of the TAP common framework, especially to analyze the different interventions and initiatives using some guiding checklist. So based on the framework to fit the joint rapid appraisal. So as we learn from all this documented experience, we found it quite feasible to apply the analytical framework, the TAP common framework, especially to the processes as well as the conclusions and the recommendations for follow-up and actions. So this different experience showing that we are focused, the focus was mainly the larger projects, but also analyze their activity interventions they reported. So generally, what we can report in terms of lesson are there is a diversity of interventions at different levels. It could be at the national and sectoral level. Mostly these interventions and initiatives are project funded, but also it calls for different community engagement and the leadership in the process. So this often called for institutional capacity strengthening, especially for different multi-stakeholders initiatives. The experience, for instance, the innovation platforms and the country forum. So this, in fact, that can really facilitate the process at the local and grassroots level. So these are some of the experience which we can highlight in terms of the agriculture innovation systems based on our desk review. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And let's move on to the next team from Asia.
Hello, everyone. So the key highlights from Asia Pacific were basically, I'm going to talk about lessons in strengthening AIS and what we found on that there are very few cases of strengthening capacities for AIS per se. So there is a lot of focus on strengthening functional skills by the research and the extension. There is an importance given, but then focus is primarily still on development of technical skills. And capacity development is mostly understood as changing the behavior of the farmers through training them on new technologies and approaches. And often it is, most of the projects have been focusing on that. Then multi-stakeholder partnerships are mostly seen in externally funded projects, which fizzle out once the projects are over. And these are mostly dealing with natural resource management, value chains, these kind of approaches. And there are no kind of mechanisms to sustain these partnerships beyond the project lifecycle. The third lesson which came out very strongly was that system thinking is very rare, and capacity development initiatives have mostly focused on building the capacity of the ground level as well as the middle level staff. Whereas inculcating developing systems thinking in senior level as well as policy level, people would have really helped in developing a systems thinking in the research as well as extension organizations. So this is all from kind of, we just tried to kind of.
Excellent. Thank you, Nimisha. And let's move on to the Latin American Caribbean team.
Hello, everyone. This is Priscilla here. We have three main lessons. The first one is sustained efforts are necessary. In Latin America, we have had a lot of efforts throughout the years. The Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture has been supporting networks, PROCISUR, PROCINORTE, PROMECAFE, CARDI in the Caribbean region, FORAGRO, RELASER, FONTAGRO, but this is not enough. And there is still a very incipient innovation system with participation from the international research centers based in the region, CIP, CIMIT, CIAT, IFPRI, which are very active, with participation from the NARs. Each country has an NAR, and some are stronger than others. And there is a myriad of farmers organizations. Some are conglomerated in the Programa de Desarrollo Rural Regional, and some in the Vía Campesina. So the first lesson is sustaining is important. The second lesson is that the concept of innovation system and innovation per se in agriculture still is not clearly understood. In some countries, such as Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, and Costa Rica, there are efforts to formalize an innovation system at the national level and define the roles of the different actors. In these countries, there is probably more awareness of the need for information and tools to enhance the capacities to innovate at the different levels. In the survey that we carried out just for Latin America and the Andean region, 94% of the respondents indicating that they are familiar with the concept of innovation systems. And 77% indicated that the innovation can emerge from several sources and with participation from multiple actors. So this is really good news, there is some awareness. And of course, when we ask about strengthening functional capacities, 60% of these people who responded to the questionnaire indicating that soft skills are equally as important as technical skills. So we're moving the needle a little bit forward in that regard too. The third lesson is that sustainability is still an issue and that we need more support. There are only 2 countries in the region that had implemented CDICE projects. Guatemala and Honduras, and there is a third in El Salvador being implemented with support from the Italian government by FAO. Once the project ends, it's impossible to continue. So I'm going to stop here because I have another note on the importance of strengthening during COVID, which is still a challenge. So I'm going to stop here and thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is very clear from your side. I think let's move on to the second question, the second round of all three panelists, and you can choose the panelist who is going to answer. Could you please highlight the investment options for effectively strengthening the AIS based on your study? Could you please highlight the investment options to effectively strengthen the agricultural innovation systems based on your study or based on your experiences? Let's start from Asia this time.
Thank you, Salvaraju. Hello, everybody. This is Martina from APAARI. Can you hear well?
Yes.
Can you? Okay, good. So our study has found, okay, great. So our study has found that in many Asian countries, governments and donors have been investing mainly in building and strengthening agriculture R&D capacities, such as the quality of research and many others, and basically focusing more on support to science and technology development. However, increasingly what we see is this trend to also include the development of non-technical capacities in development programs. And in Asia countries, maybe also in other regions, but countries don't tend to refer to these capacities as capacities for innovation. But we have found actually three types of such capacity development interventions that Asian countries have been investing in to contribute towards that boost of innovation capacity in the region. And these are education and training, then multi-stakeholder projects and platforms that also Nimisha mentioned before, and institutional development. So these are the three typologies that we have found, and actually they will be discussed in the groups later. But what I'm trying to say here is that while these initiatives are ongoing across Asia, we have found that much more efforts need to be invested in the development of functional capacities and promoting the AIS perspective, because the culture of innovation is generally lacking to build integrated and well-functioning national innovation systems. So this needs to be built systematically. And since it takes a long time and long-term effort to change the existing systems, and this is often, I mean, you very well know that this is often due to complex set of institutional, political, and socioeconomic constraints, which can be extremely frustrating, especially if one is looking at kind of long-term investments and long-term perspective. But one of the entry points that we have found is that the focus of CD investment should be on achieving kind of more practical results through developing capacity for collaboration, for engagement between research institutions, universities, and especially with the private sector. But this requires public and private sector actors to collaborate in new ways. So they need to move beyond these current arrangements, which are based on linear technology transfer. And of course, farmers need to be part of these innovation systems, playing an active role rather than just being recipients of these technologies. And then the second entry point is that, which is I think very interesting, which is coming out of this assessment, is that national governments need to really invest in removing the obstacles for innovation. And I believe personally that our AIS assessment model can really help these countries identify such obstacles. So in other words, the countries need to really ensure that a basic enabling environment for innovation is in place before they get into some complex innovation policies. And governments specifically need to look beyond their expenditure on R&D. I'm not saying that these are not important, they are, but they really need to also look at the improvement of innovation enablers. Yeah, we call them facilitators in our terminology under the common framework. So this also includes capacities of rural advisory services for coordination, research management, but especially engagement between key innovation actors. So the point I want to make here is that this may not really require significant financial investments, but rather a different way of working. So for example, we can really invest in kind of.
Thank you, Martina. I think you also answered to the third question. So probably you will have some more time, and you please complete it in maybe 15 seconds. Please.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's right. I just wanted to say, Salvaraju, that there are also country-specific recommendations on investments, but of course, there's no time to discuss these, so I'm not going to get into details. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And let's move on to Africa.
Hopefully you can all hear me. Christian Bienig from FARA.
Yes.
I guess what Martina highlighted were very much what we saw, that there's a whole range of investments or interventions that we came across, some more ambitious than others. So in our case, for example, we reviewed some of the let's say interventions in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, and they range from broad ambitions to influence policy to even influencing the way government and donors work together to address the needs of the communities. And in some cases, focused on how to influence the way extension systems improve on the efficiency or effectiveness in reaching farmers. And on the other hand, you have other programs that start from the other end, or they focus on how do we get the farm organizations themselves, for example, if you take extension or dissemination of innovations, how do the farm organizations themselves take on that role of promoting these technologies or innovations through technical knowledge and improving the skills of their members? So we found that while we are, as Marina also said, while we're addressing innovations, but we don't express them in terms of the innovation systems concept and the language.
Yeah.
So basically we have a range of interventions, if you want to call them investments, in terms of, from policy engagement right down to the involving the farmers on these promising technologies.
Yeah.
So what we seem to find also is that there is that missing element is, again, I think Marina mentioned, is that the linkages amongst the existing initiatives, whether it is at the same level across a geographic region or even vertically through the hierarchy of systems. So the answer would be that there is no one-size-fits-all solutions in terms of the investments, but I think what is important is that at each point of our intervention, we create the connections with something else, or we leave the hooks in there for other interventions to be able to latch on to our interventions to create that kind of the collective benefit in terms of the development agenda. Thank you very much.
Excellent, Christian. Let's move on to the Latin American Caribbean region experience on investment.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. About the investment option, it's important to remember, originally investment in innovation system has been driven primarily by public investment, by loan contracts with multilateral sources such as World Bank, IDB, IFAD, through grants. Public agencies have been assuming them gradually through its regular budget, aiming at financing public services for innovation. But our recent survey highlights the problem of funding. Investment was mainly geared to the development of technical and economic capacities. Example, associating research and extension project with business plan. Although enhancing multi-link collaboration, horizontal, vertical, and supply relations with demand, and co-financing, share risk approach, both important functional capacities. Higher investment needs to have better evidences of innovation. So it's important to have a good M&E and learning system we can discuss with donors, governments, and regional institutions. In the future, the effectiveness of investment in agricultural innovation system goes through four substantial issues. One, strategic political driving and better articulation and synergies between public agencies. Second, improving innovation services supply, wider, quality, and closer. Third, enhancing co-financing approach. Fourth, monitoring and evaluation system with indicators about functional capacities. About first will be necessary capacity development to decision makers and surely reforms of institutions. About second, train the trainers, give more importance to functional capacity buildings.
Yeah, thank you very much. And let's quickly move on to the last question before I summarize. The third one, probably we will start from Latin American Caribbean region. Please highlight the main gaps in approaches for strengthening the AIS, and then how the TAP tools and approaches can be integrated or institutionalized to fill these gaps. What are the main gaps in approaches for strengthening the AIS, gaps in strengthening the AIS, and then how the TAP tools and approaches can be integrated or institutionalized to fill the gaps? Let me put this question very straightforward. How the regional research and extension organizations can make sure that TAP tools can be integrated properly to address the gaps in the region, in the respective regions?
Okay, yeah. I'm going to start with Latin America here.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you. The main gaps. Most of the agricultural development projects for capacity building are formulated with a mechanistic view of innovation. Like, if we train people on the use of technology, it will be adopted. Aside from lacking an adequate view of the innovation system and the need for an enabling environment, this approach fails to recognize that the need to facilitate opportunities to strengthen the functional capacities. So we believe that development organizations, and in particularly donors, need to be made aware of this drawback when funding projects. Also, there is a need to continue challenging this approach and also insert capacity building for innovation using the TAP Common Framework. This will be a useful approach, at least in Latin America. The second one is that everyone understands the need to train scientists with new tools like, bioinformatics, gene editing, all that, and farmers with new technologies that they can actually use in the field. But the dimensions of collaboration, building trust, distilling lessons from what has functioned in other locations, promoting women leaders, this is usually relegated to the end of the project with little funding. So we need projects that work in this capacity strengthening from the very beginning. And the third one is that it is important that not only focusing on the individual and organizational level, but also, as it was mentioned before, in the enabling environment as well. Right now, many decision makers in the countries are focusing on containing COVID, managing disasters like the hurricanes. But strengthening capacities should be emphasized even during hard times, because this can be part of the recovery efforts as well. Trained people are more capable to solve problems. I'm going to leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now let's move on to Asia.
Thank you so much.
The same question.
Yeah, so let me, I'm going to kind of focus not on the gaps so much, because I think we have already spoken on the gaps. So what we like to share was that one of the things which Agriculture Extension South Asia is a network which we are also hosting. So we worked on this whole curricular reforms in India, and basically that is one of the things which we would So we basically came up with an alliance of Manage, which is a national institution for capacity development of the extension service providers, and worked with them and as a part of a subject matter committee for the master's as well as the PhD courses in MSc extension, especially in agricultural extension. So the whole idea behind this is that, if we really needed to change the way people think about capacities, we need to kind of influence the course curricula and support inclusion of systems perspective in the curricula, which we found was missing. Then also work with national capacity development organizations and help them design new courses which focus on capacity development for innovation, use TAP documents to develop appropriate training modules, and also help organizations develop capacities for facilitation at all levels, because there's often, facilitation is a word which is not, people don't really know how to facilitate. They do not know how to work in teams when we talk about soft skills. Then because the complex challenges which are facing agriculture right now need kind of, partnerships, but people often don't know how to forge partnerships. It is mostly hierarchical. Organizations tend to think of themselves as givers and not really, they have their own mandates. They don't really come together as such.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nimisha. I think you brought out two most important points. I think this is enough for now. Well, let's move on to the next intervention from Africa. Krishan and team, please.
Thank you very much. This is Samson again. So in terms of the gaps, basically, I would like to also provide practical experience, which we have conducted under the Capacity Gaps Assessment Initiative under the DESIRA program, which we conducted AFAAS, FARA, and SROs. So in terms of capacity gaps, we have identified a lot of gaps, and we are in the process of developing capacity strengthening implementation plan. Definitely we'll be addressing those initiatives. But based on the experience of the desk analysis, mostly the gaps are, it's like appreciation of the ad hoc intervention of project-specific activities, which really needs a call or attention, a kind of intervention of a holistic approach and the multi-stakeholders engagement model, such as the country fora of the AFAAS and the innovation platform where the research and development they are promoting. So that means it needs a holistic approach to address all those gaps. I think most of, our previous speakers, they have also highlighted, and I don't want to repeat all those, the intervention, but again, the more focus was on technical capacities rather than functional capacity, which needs, again, attention to address those functional capacities and innovation support services. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much to all the panelists, all the 6 panelists. I think we have completed the talk show. Now let's open the floor for questions from the participants, and you can raise your hand. And please ask your question, and please tell to whom your question is posed to. No one so far. Or you don't need to raise the hand. Please ask the question. Yes, Ravi.
Yeah, thank you, Selvaraju. I would like to
Your hand came like a blessing to me.
Okay. I would like to ask each of the panelists, including ones from Asia, have they observed in the whole scenario how bureaucracy is coming in play when we talk of capacity development program in an organization? How the people who are for individual capacity, when you have to select people for capacity development, how there are preferences of the wrong people by the bosses. And there are so many things which really interfere in the ideal principle of capacity development we are talking about. This is, having said that, I would like to say again, innovation actually is basically a quality of most of the human beings. If you look at invention, if Alexander Graham Bell, he invented telephone, there are thousands of mobiles which have come up in different shape, form, configuration, and all. So innovation is there, a large number of innovation. People who invent are very few. And human mind is innovative, especially for commercial reasons, when it comes to commerce. And in non-commercial thing, most of the innovations captured across the continents, people do not know they are innovative. They are doing it. They don't capture it well. These are the points I think we really need to deliberate at some stage. A lot of indigenous innovations are there, and they have just not been captured.
Yeah, yeah.
We only work on what we have captured, and we make our ideas and principles and all. But this is something which I think needs to be considered for our overall program of innovation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ravi. I think I could summarize two questions from your intervention. One is, to what extent the bureaucrats influence the capacity development program? And this question is to the Asia Pacific team. And then, to what extent the local innovation are taken into consideration when we talk about the capacity development? Could you please quickly answer in 1 minute?
Okay, maybe I can start.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ravi, for this question. And in fact, when we identified this first entry point regarding the focus on practical results rather than really long-term looking at, I don't know, some really long-term development objectives, I'm not saying that is not important, but in some countries, basically this kind of long-term approach does not work, because what we came across, for example, in studying the Indonesia case, it's very obvious that especially donor or NGO supported projects that are working on capacity development are working much better where there is less bureaucracy. And this is what they are also trying to address by working really on these practical elements and practical capacity development to be addressed. So this is really like one of the obstacles where, for example, the focus on improving coordination and communication, between these different agencies are really important. And especially, of course, like, improving capacity at these different levels, like including administration, and getting rid of these obstacles, like I mentioned already before, like in terms of bureaucracy and many others. So I think Indonesia would be a perfect example to answer your question.
Yeah. And also, selection of the candidates, that also matters a lot, because, they don't really pick the right candidate to be trained on these new issues. Excellent. And let's hear from other colleagues. Francisco?
If I may, on behalf of Latin America, I totally agree with Martina's point.
Okay. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we have to have very clear in the project is what the objectives of training or capacity building are, and prepare specific terms of reference, so we know that we are selecting the best people for the training. And I think a lot of projects do that. A lot of projects, tend to be focusing on perhaps, supporting more government officials or supporting more, some communities, because those are their targets. But if you have specific goals, if you have a specific mechanism how to measure capacity development and capacity building, and if you have specific terms of reference of what the people are going to do with the training, there is help there. And, we're trying to do that in Latin America, but it's so diverse here that, projects differ. And one of the things that we have to be mindful of is that, don't forget about women and the youth. Right now in Latin America, there is a big effort on capacity building for women, for youth. IICA is supporting a lot of these mechanisms. So it's important, if you're gonna train people, remember the youth. They're really important too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And our Africa team want to respond to this one? Barriers from
yeah,
the
maybe
bureaucrats.
I can go ahead. I think some of the issues of bureaucracy, well, bureaucracy probably has been there before we arrived and will still be there after we've left this world. But I think we have to do with what the situations we are dealing with. And some of the issues that Ravi mentioned also, facing the challenges of capacity, I think they are very much generic to any capacity development program, and not just the ones where on top of that, we're trying to focus on how to develop the innovation systems approach. So having said that, the issue of there will be no one project that can be established to achieve the goals of agricultural innovation systems. So this is why we need to adopt a programmatic approach in terms of our interventions, which might also then be able to help us overcome the issues of bureaucracy that come and go. There's a larger commitment that has been developed, either in terms of a shared vision across a larger group of people, or even some commitment that is taken or sort of concretized in the form of a heads of state statement in terms of science, technology, and innovation that allows us as practitioners to say that whatever activities we're doing are aiming towards that ultimate goal. And I think that is perhaps where we can bring in this this issue of coping with the challenges that we face in terms of bureaucracy.
Yeah. Thank you, Krishan. And let's hear from Francisco. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you very much. It's interesting, this issue about the gaps, but my question is, do we have concrete information of these gaps, especially in enable environment, so we can focus capacity development to fill these gaps? Do we have information? Do we have indicators for that?
Yeah. Who is going to start answering to this question?
Maybe I can
Yes, yes, please, Rashid. Excellent. Please.
Actually, when we did the capacity need assessment, I think I'm talking from the extension side. We did the capacity assessment in 4 countries in the region, I think 2 years back, where we try to identify the capacity gaps at the individual, organizational, and the enabling environment level, which is mostly about what the senior managers we are trying to look at, what are their kind of a capacity gaps. We could see that there is a big gap in terms of influencing policy. Senior managers do not have the confidence on dealing with the policy makers, especially the bureaucrats, because they don't be able to provide evidence. They are not able to articulate what they need. Another is the evaluation, monitoring and evaluation, especially the use of ICTs in terms of monitoring and evaluation. Another is the major challenges with respect to partnership building. These are all kind of a gaps empirically, in the sense which we have through a capacity need assessment, we have identified some of these. So I think that is only one example I would like to point out here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rashid. And from our FAO colleagues, what is the status of the capacity needs assessment that was done immediately after the G20 2012 meeting? Because that was the precursor to the CDAAS project. Do you want to say a few words about that? Any of our colleagues who knew about that? Degi?
Sure,
Yes.
You mean before CDAAS project?
Yes.
Well, there was this regional study that was carried out to see the capacity needs. It was also another regional scoping study, and some of the suggestions was that there is, capacity development interventions are largely focusing on individual capacities, mainly the individual trainings, focusing on technical areas, and that was. The study concluded that approach was not very effective and sustainable way of strengthening the capacities, in particular their capacity to innovate. Therefore, the recommendation was made to the TAP to focus on the functional capacity. That's how the TAP Common Framework focus to functional capacity was made based on this regional study.
Yeah, I think this is, this can be a very good suggestion for the way forward. As it was suggested during the partner assembly, they wanted to see the impact and the outcome of the systems thinking and also the approach of agricultural innovation systems in really influencing the attitude and behavioral changes. And probably if we combine with the capacity needs, what really need to be addressed to make sure that the outcome is reached very effectively, probably there may be an opportunity to continue this work. And is there any intervention from the teams on the capacity needs assessment? If not, we will listen to Aurélie. Aurélie, please go ahead with your question.
Okay, hello everybody. Thanks, Selva. I just wanted to build on a little bit on what Martina said, that in fact we do not need to have new investment, but just to change the way people are working. But well, some of you gave already some insight into this, saying that we still need some investment, but maybe in a different way that it's done actually, because what we saw in CDIS project is that in order to get changes in mindset, attitude, and practices, we need to have a project and concrete activities to work with, because adults learned while doing. This is learning by doing, and it's very difficult to support such changes in the way of working without having opportunities to apply the new knowledge that people gain in how to, to better collaborate, how to engage with policymakers, and etc. So investment are still very much needed in activities, in joint activities, whatever they are, joint activities for innovations at different levels, levels of farmers organizations, because this is needed for researchers and extension workers to have these spaces of opportunities for joint collaboration, to learn how to work differently together. So I just wanted to add a point on this, that maybe this is a very important thing to consider, which is investment targeted toward organizations, not individuals, just as Degi recalled. It was emphasized before CDS project, but what we know better now is that this is at the level of some organizations where we need to create a culture of impact, a culture of collaboration, and it requires internal changes in these organizations, from the heads to the staff, to the bottom staff, just as Rashid said, but inside organizations, because this is the most difficult thing, is to get changes in the way organizations work together. So this is the types of investment that are very much needed. Well, I would say if we want to get such systemic changes.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Aurélie. I think Krishan, please go ahead.
I just wanted to build on what has been said and some of the comments about the systems approach. And I think as Priscilla started the session, she said there's a need for long-term commitment or long-term investment. And I'm just looking at the message about the value of collaboration, the value of using a systems approach does not happen overnight. And so either we have to be smart enough to be able to have the investment over a longer time, that people can see the journey that has been taking place, either through different projects or within an institution, as Aurélie just mentioned. It's a change of culture. So I think it's also our role is to also understand that we have to be able to tell the story or to link the stories of what has been happening across different interventions to show them this is how your community has changed, or you're doing things differently, or you're working smarter. So in terms of the value of collaboration, while we are still very much focused on impact, the policymakers needs to be able to understand the linkage between what he's doing and what has actually happened on the ground, and not just be happy that, oh yes, somebody is reporting impact on something or some target area where my project intervened, but understanding that they had something to do, or their predecessors had something to do, and that they will be continuing this culture that will continue having more impact. And I think that's the lesson for us, that we should be telling the story in the right way.
Yeah, excellent, Christian. I think with the systems thinking, we could able to, of course, when we influence the policymakers, and essentially this has to lead to some drastic decisions like reform of the institutions, so to make sure that there is a opportunity for collaboration from the institutional perspective as well. It's not only the attitude and behavior, because the enabling environment and also the resources should also contribute to this. I think this is it's a long-term process, but I think if we start at least in a couple of countries where the things are already happening, and we try to build this agricultural innovation systems approach and try to demonstrate maybe in 10 years time, probably this can be an excellent model for many countries to follow. So thank you so much, and let me ask each of the team to give 1 minute summary, not 2 minutes. We planned for 2 minutes. Now I ask you to give 1 minute keywords. Maybe 1 point is also enough for us. 1 minute summary from your interventions. Can we start from Africa?
Okay, I think, yes, I've talked a lot, so many of the points have been said. I think the one key message here is connect your intervention with other interventions. Show the continuity, show the connections, so that we contribute to this long-term story about how we're achieving impact in the long term. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Christian. Connect the story and long-term impact. Okay. From Asia?
Okay. Thank you. Actually, I will refer to what also Christian said. I think what is really important is that innovation and knowledge management cannot be separated. And what we also found in the assessment was that there are many problems that countries are facing with dissemination and demonstration of research and good practices for other countries to follow. And as was said before, there are simply not enough stories to tell. So there are relatively few examples and models that the countries can demonstrate. So building these KM capacities to develop outreach models, especially to enable this large-scale adoption of good practices, and also to facilitate learning and documentation of these practices, is extremely important. So this needs to be an important part of this functional capacity development.
Excellent. Thank you, Martina. Knowledge management and capacity development should go hand in hand. Excellent. Thank you so much. And from Latin America and Caribbean?
One of the things that we believe is critical is that the projects or any initiative that strengthens collaboration and innovation should start with some set of milestones and indicators that are able to monitor the progress. Because if you only monitor progress on technical issues, that's kind of easy to do. But how do you monitor progress when you're talking about facilitation, reflection, learning to trust, collaboration, promoting honest exchanges and trust is important. Learn to, adequately document good case stories, strengthen synergies among the organizations. So all these, how do you set good monitoring and reporting indicators? That's, for us, is a key issue too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think monitoring and reporting is key, and having a trust among the partners and different actors is also very important. So your conclusion is more philosophical, looking at the trust of the different partners. You know, I don't want to go through, this is my role now to summarize in 2 minutes. I don't want to take 2 minutes of summary, and also don't want to repeat the same thing what you have already said. Just I would like to highlight one thing, looking at the resource availability and the current context of the institutional systems that that encompasses different actors of agricultural innovation systems. I think most important for us is the entry point where we can enter, and that entry point should have the enough capacity and capability to bring different actors together. Probably this is the missing part. We cannot really enter into different institutions and try to bring the other actors together. I try to insist as part of our DeSIRA project, ongoing DeSIRA project, where we enter, that entry point should have enough leverage and should be able to articulate adequately so that they can bring in different actors together. And probably this may lead to some multi-stakeholder innovation platform at the national level, or it may be at the innovation support service providers level, or it can also be at the innovation niche level at the local. There are ongoing initiatives like, for example, innovation niche. I immediately relate somehow to the FAO's Farmer Field School approach. So this approach, it brings different actors, but not all the actors. It's more of a lateral at the local level, but not all the actors. It's mostly the Farmer Field School facilitators and farmers themselves, and somehow the farmers may be member of some farmers associations, but not other partners. But there are existing mechanisms at different levels, and that provides us an opportunity to build the multi-stakeholder platform to address the issue. But as you mentioned, the most important aspect is how can we influence the policymakers and bureaucrats to make sure that they buy in this approach and also provide adequate enabling environment to all these different institutions. So I thank you very much. I think we have taken 12 minutes over the allocated time. Hope this is manageable. So I thank you once again to all the panelists and also all participants for making this talk show very lively. Thank you so much. Over to you, Degi.
Well, thank you very much for a very rich first session. I think we had many questions and some of them are answered in the chat. I hope we can save the chat for later reference. Now we will begin in the second session, in which we will try to build on the typology of experience in innovation processes. Tim Chancellor from the Natural Resources Institute will be in charge of this session. So go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, thank you very much, Viviana. Although I will be moderating, this is going to be a very participatory session, so we look forward to some good interaction. I've been providing support to Degi, Manuela and the regional teams in the development and implementation of the methodology for the regional assessments. And as we've heard in the session that's just ended, the regional teams have been identifying and analysing capacity development initiatives for enhancing agricultural innovation. They've come up with a diverse set of projects, programmes and other types of capacity development interventions. One of the tasks now, we think, is to categorise these varied initiatives to gain a better understanding of what is currently being done by who, for the benefit of who, for what purpose, and with what approaches. So we think that by categorizing these interventions in the form of a typology, we'll help the stakeholders to more easily visualize the key characteristics of the interventions. by mapping the current interventions onto this typology, we will be able to use it hopefully to assist with decision-making and as a guide for future planning. And this type of approach has been used in other ways in the agricultural arena. One example is deriving categories of farmers from characteristics which are likely to influence their response to engaging in certain activities. So for example, it might be their ability and willingness to embrace ecologically sound nutrient management practices. Another example, a recent initiative in categorizing different types of mapping tools to assess their suitability for supporting the management of ecosystem service provision. So it's a kind of well tried and tested approach, and we think it's going to be helpful for the work that we're discussing now. So in this session, we'd like to draw on your ideas and experiences, and this will assist us to start to design a typology of capacity development processes for enhancing innovation. What we'll be doing is randomly assigning you to a breakout group where you will have a facilitator and a rapporteur who have been pre-assigned, and so they'll be giving you more detailed guidance on what actually needs to be done. I think if we can just move on to the slide, which next, that's great, yeah. So what we've come up with as a sort of framework for the discussion are 4 broad areas which we feel are important in designing a typology. So first of all, we're thinking that the purpose of the capacity development process is something that we need to reflect on. And what we're looking for really as an output from the discussion is a sort of set of broad categories of capacity development initiatives, taking into account the aims and the scope of capacity strengthening initiatives, the target stakeholder group, and whether or not an initiative targets a particular component or a set of components of the agricultural innovation system. We're not expecting comprehensive findings from this very brief discussion. This is really a brainstorming session to generate some ideas and get some good interaction. So that's the first group. If we could move on to the second group with the next slide. Okay, so well, we are aware that capacity strengthening initiatives arise in different ways, and they could be more or less demand-led. They could also have originated from the public or the private sector. So there's a range of different ways in which initiatives can actually arise and be rooted. So what we would hope to come out of this discussion are some examples of potential drivers for capacity development initiatives and some of the issues associated with those drivers that we might want to reflect on. And the next one, please. Then this one is quite closely linked to the issue of the purpose, but we're looking here a bit more specifically, hoping that we can get some reflections on sort of broad brush generic approaches to individual organizational, institutional capacity development for innovation. We know that the approach used in a particular initiative is going to be influenced by the objectives and also by factors such as the available resources and the time frame. And we know also that certain initiatives are going to be more or less participatory. Some are going to be probably quite directed. So we're really looking at trying to come up with some sort of a frame for how we can look at the diversity of initiatives with respect to the approaches. And then finally, last but not least, we recognize the importance of sustaining the change that is desired from the process. And this is something that, you know, several of the speakers mentioned in the previous session. So what we mean by sustainability really is that the change that we want to see is sustained beyond the lifetime of a particular intervention. And then thinking about sustainability, there are certain things that we might want to reflect on. Does the initiative require external resources in order to sustain the change which has arisen? Is it designed in a way that actually institutionalizes the desired change from the outset? And so what we're hoping for here are just some ideas on the sustainability of desired change, some descriptors which actually might help us to think about that. So those are the 4 groups. As I mentioned earlier, you will be randomly assigned to the group. Each group will have a facilitator and a presenter, but we're very much looking forward to capturing some of your ideas and experiences within that. You'll have 20 minutes for discussion. The first 5 minutes is just really a reflection on whether you feel that these 4 elements which we have come up with adequately capture what we're really trying to achieve here. If you think that there's a glaring omission, then you can exchange your ideas on that within the group, and your facilitator and rapporteur will pick up on that and report back to the plenary. So after we've had the 20-minute discussion, we'll have an opportunity for some feedback from the groups, and then a little bit of, hopefully there'll be a little bit of time for a discussion before we wrap up. So with that, I'll hand you back, and I wish you fruitful discussions and look forward to hearing the feedback.
Okay, so Manuela, maybe? Okay,
right.
we will be automatically directed into a room, and
Well, I think we're all back in the main room, and what we're going to do now is to have a short feedback session from the rapporteurs in each of the group. And I think logically we'll follow the order of the numbering of the groups. So if we could have some feedback first from group 1 on the purpose.
Thank you. So we had a very lively discussion, and but I mean, each one of our presenters shared, our group members, they shared their kind of experiences. So Aurelie shared mainly about, their whole experience from CDIS transversal analysis, and the purposes were basically motivation, new knowledge, empowerment, and this was mostly focused on groups of individuals and promoting them into collaborative innovation. And then these had subcategories, so basically in empowerment, it was about building trust, provide technical backstopping, creating opportunities to work together, access to material resources, and moving to motivation, incentivization in terms of rewards, competitions, coercion, though she was saying that, it isn't that great a word, but then how pushing them to collaborate, leveraging experience, and I mean, sometimes when these collaborative experiences work really well, then people want to be together and are motivated. New knowledge, training, informing, advising. These were the subcategories of the new knowledge. Then one of our group members, he spoke on basically, equipping people with skills and tools. This could be the aim of capacity development. For example, new skills and partnerships, how to basically facilitate relationship between different stakeholders. So one is the capacity to be able to do that, and then which are the different tools which people can use. Promote skills on facilitation to work in complexity, how to respond to complexity. Then another person, he was talking more in terms of whose perspective we are looking at when we are talking about the purpose. So I think it's kind of, a little with the drivers, I think we were kind of, getting into that area, but then also from basically also things like, expectations change as we go along. So the purpose could have been something in the beginning, but as we go along an initiative, especially with multi-stakeholder partnerships and different kind of complexities arising, challenges arising, this might change. Then also about basically, most of the times the problem is that the objective is technical, hence there is more focus on technical capacities, but if it is market orientation, so basically thematic focus of the donor is often there. And then how do we basically kind of, work in that and build up a cross-cutting theme for the whole AIS. And then also who are the targets of the initiatives would drive the capacity development efforts. And then some priority, and like I said earlier, some could be prioritized as capacities which are needed initially, but then these would change. For example, capacity to engage might be given initially in a project which involves multi-stakeholders, and this might change as the project goes along. And then basically innovation and having an innovation approach is more about a cultural kind of bringing about a behavioral change. So this also could be the purpose. Thank you. And this is all from our side.
Thank you very much. That's an impressive amount of information that you were able to document and communicate in a short period of time. And a lot of that is going to be very useful. I think as we go through the presentations, we're going to see a little bit of synergy, maybe is a better word than overlap, between the findings, but that's fine, because I think that it's interesting to see the linkages between these different elements. So maybe now we'll move on to the second group.
Okay.
Yes, Rashid, yes.
Can
you see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Okay.
I think in our group, we have been looking at the drivers of capacity development. Initially, we spent some time in looking at the types of the typology in terms of purpose drivers, sustainability, and the different types. And we thought it's a very perfect organization of the typology. I think when we were discussing about the main drivers, we could see that there are many factors or many aspects that drive capacity development. One could be as part of a value chain development. There are a number of examples in that where we focus on a commodity, and there is the focus is on building capacities along the value chain. That is a driver, most often from the private sector or maybe from the donors. Second is the emergency, disruptions, climate change. So these are also creating sometimes new drivers for capacity development. Policy changes is another. At the national policy level, the governments decide, okay, this is the way to go ahead, and so the policy drives the capacity development. Another is the digital innovation, which we are witnessing more. It is the enhanced access to ICTs and the generation of a lot of new content through digital platforms. Donors is another one. Donors play a major role as a driver of capacity development. We have been seeing it in the case of research, where international research organizations like the CJR also influences the type of capacity development in the area of research. Civil society organizations, especially big international NGOs, influence, especially organics. We have been seeing also in terms of standards, fair trade, a number of things we have been seeing. Farmers organizations, more efficient, effective, big farmers organizations play a role. So these are the different types of drivers which we have been seeing. But then the related aspects are, what is this whole issue of sustainability though it is a part of the other discussion, but who drives it also has an influence on the capacity development, sustainability of the capacity development. For instance, if it's a bigger donor project, because many times there is no exit policy. So the capacity development, the platforms, the activities that have been set up during the project period, there is no mechanism to continue. Another is we have seen sometimes the focus is on funding. So getting funding is the priority, without even developing capacities for the use of that money. Absorbability issues are there. Sometimes money, technologies, you can develop a lot of capacities, but if you don't have a system that can use this, it can be a problem. Another is the many times we have been seeing there is no proper systematic capacity need assessment, and then you develop capacities that will also create a kind of a problem. Other is this whole cultural issues can also influence, because how the demands or the needs or the capacity gaps are articulated, heard, and acted upon. I think so. This is where we are with respect to this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rashid, and thanks to all the members of that group. I think one of the things that comes through clearly there is that there could be, well, there's a very wide range of possibilities of drivers, and probably more than one that would contribute to any one initiative. And as I think we'll hear later also, you've made the point that there is a connection really between the drivers and the potential sustainability of initiatives. So I think that's also an interesting point. Shall we move on to group 3 on the approaches?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I shifted from group 1 to room 1 to room 2 and to room 3, but luckily my partners had already started the discussion, so I joined in halfway through them, looking at what was missing, and this is what we captured, and Priscilla captured on behalf of the group. While we were sharing what we thought, whether it was something about what was missing or not, we ended up talking more about what we thought should be the case, so the principles or the guiding principles. So we talk about, I'm not sure the first few points because I missed the speakers when they said that, but synthesize and use based on experience. And I guess we have to be able to share the experience. We have to, it's all about knowledge sharing, is that we have to be based on experience for others to be able to understand what we're doing and how to connect with each other. We looked at the importance of process facilitators. So in other words, the approaches have to be facilitated. There's a need for a process facilitator. And then we talk about, so capacity development, would have, if we were talking about an educational program, yes, then it can be directed capacity development. So it's not always the case that you'll have a demand, well, obviously demand driven, but one of the points that Tim had talked about is whether it is do you leave it as a loose emerging context? And I think there are cases for both of these. I think point D reflects what I said under point A, is that there's the case studies are a good source of information, good source of knowledge, good source of experience that are shared. So again, we looked at, yes, obviously you say it has to be, anything has to be demand driven, but whether it is demand driven or the way it's formulated or implemented may not necessarily reflect the actual demand. There's also this term that the extensionists in the room will remember, the term ascribed needs, where you tell people this is what you need. In some cases it's good for them, but in some cases they will say thank you very much, but no, that's not what I need. And obviously it has to be participatory. So we use the term top to bottom approach in our group, but we clarify that any of the systems has to cover the whole spectrum, and preferably there's engagement from the top in terms of the policymakers, but a series of actions that lead to the action and the impact on the ground is what we are looking for in terms of the approaches. So Tim, in terms of that first question, I think we've turned it a bit around, but we just said what should be in there and not what was missing in terms of the categorization. So then we spent, this is it. The second part is more about the differentiation that you had shown on the slide in terms of how do we differentiate the approaches, or there are different ways of, traditionally, different approaches that are focused either on the individual, the organization, or the institution. And I think in the common framework, we took off individual, organization, and system level. But once the the cat was out of the bag in terms of the what is the difference between an organization and an institution. So we spent some time explaining it to each other. But what we realized is that the confusion still exists, and we had Alfred from Malawi in our group. So we put it to him and asked him, well, what do you think is the difference between the two? And again, this issue came about, but why, how do I differentiate these two? And we concluded that it depends on so the approach is very much case specific. We said that these three are preferably done simultaneously, but we understand fully well that in our initiative, we said that there was too much focus on individual capacity development before, that we have to start looking at the institutional and systemic capacity. But at the same time, we're saying that these three have to happen simultaneously. And we again concluded that kind of a gap analysis or needs assessment is a good starting point in terms of defining what is needed. But at the same time, the case study will determine what would be your starting point. And we thought it's more like, what is your most serious, your bottleneck, or what is your weakest link is what you would address. But at the same time, ensure that we tell the whole story of, once we've started with this weakest link today, once this is overcome, what should be the next elements that we focus on? And that was the conversation in the 20 minutes we had. And we told Alfred that we would gladly be his support group in terms of him going on in his project, so we can consult. He can consult us on this.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's interesting when you went through the initial 5-minute discussion. I was starting to think that we might need a matrix in 3 dimensions rather than 2, but then I think you clarified that these are characteristics that we might see kind of contained within the other elements, probably. Yeah. So, but it was useful to see those points. I just want to check with the organizers that we're still okay for time, that we're not going to be ejected from the room that we're currently in. I know we do need to wrap up fairly soon, but do we still have a few more minutes that we're able to continue?
I think so. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Raju. Yeah, so let's have the presentation from Group 4.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So we were discussing sustainability of the desired change, and basically on the first kind of reflection, there was not much. There was just one suggestion that maybe the different levels of interventions, like whether it is local or kind of more at the policy level, should be considered in the purpose. And the given typologies are sufficient. There were no comments on that. And then the final part, which was basically focused on the discussion of the different elements that we need to consider in sustainability. So we kind of looked at 2 ends of that. The first one was the discussion that we had on the participatory multi-stakeholder processes that can build long-term commitment and leadership in organizations in order to ensure the desired change. And then the second end was, the other end was basically looking at training of individuals with external resources in technical aspects without adequate emphasis on application that could lead to, kind of more short-term outcomes. But then we have also asked the question whether a one-time organizational training can lead to long-term outcomes or not. And then somebody was saying that the biggest problem with short-term projects is financial. So when the project ends, there is the end of funding. I think somebody else mentioned that in the other group. And we need to really consider sustainability of inputs versus sustainability of outcome of any intervention. Yeah. Then we also discussed the kind of linkages between the different criteria. So basically, we came to the conclusion that sustainability may be influenced by other criteria, for example, by drivers, by approaches, etc. And then there was a suggestion that embedding innovation and related capacities in project designs could lead to more sustainable outcomes. But this would also require embedding this in the policies that are guiding such projects. And the final comment was on building functional capacities as separate activities may be very expensive. So again, going back to funding. So building of capacities at that meso level, at the level of organization, could be a more sustainable option. So that's it from our group. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that very clear and succinct presentation, Martina. I just see a note in the chat from Aurelie drawing our attention to the possibility of thinking about monitoring and evaluation and learning built into the process. And I think that's a very good point. I mean, we had actually thought about that in relation to, I think, the first point on the slide, but we didn't present it in that way. But I think that's a very important point for us to consider. So I'm just wondering now, I mean, for me, that the discussion in the group that I joined was very rich, and I think that we've had a lot of very interesting issues that have come through. I'm just wondering if anybody wants to comment on whether they see in their mind's eye a kind of typology emerging, and whether they think that it is going to be a useful way of trying to synthesize some of the information in a way that is going to be useful to people, whether it is just somebody with an interest in doing research on innovation systems, whether it's somebody who is at the policy end. What do people feel now about this? This was a kind of, wasn't something that we were thinking about initially, but it was, as the initiative developed, we were thinking that this would be a useful way of trying to capture some of the information. I wonder if anybody would like to give their comment on that. And please speak, because I'm not sure that I can see any hands at the moment.
Maybe I think this is a good way of looking at the past interventions. So I think it is a good tool for analyzing the existing initiatives. But I'm not sure in terms of directing, looking to the future, how we are going to use these typology. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. You don't think that if this is a living document which captures the range of different types of activity that are being conducted, that it might be a reference point for decision makers, for example, to see what is currently being done, how different initiatives might connect. This is a point I think that we heard from Christian and others earlier on, trying to ensure that there is between the different initiatives that are taking place. But then I suppose one of the questions there is how that might be continually updated. This is a problem with all of these types of things, that it needs continual input.
Tim, I think that, like in almost any analysis and classification, the process that goes into discussing and analyzing this gives many inputs for learning from the people who are doing the classification. What we need to think maybe in a later stage, when we have all our ideas together and all the inputs from these sessions, is on a more communicational way of presenting it so it can be useful for people who are starting processes. So maybe that's, I mean, for example, in our group about the sustainable or the sustainability of the interventions, we discussed a little bit of how to classify things within that criteria. But the core of the discussion was what really helped for sustainability. What are the key elements to take into account? So maybe we have to build a little bit on that and have time to reflect on everything so it can be shown in our final reports or in the final outcomes from these meetings.
Yes, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think we should think a little bit beyond just categorization and see how some of the learning that comes from this can be used to inform the design of future initiatives. And with that in mind, I see a note in the chat from Manuela suggesting that the output from this might actually feed into the country level activities in the TAP project that Degi referred to in her initial presentation. So it could be a useful resource for them to use as well. Yeah. I am conscious of,
Tim,
sorry.
Can I come? Sorry.
Please,
can I
Ravi,
come
yeah.
in?
Yeah.
Yeah. What I feel we need to focus on the failures where we have not achieved what we wanted with our experiences. The failures needs to be well documented, but probably a bit carefully, because what may be a failure in Asia can be a success in Africa. It may be contextual, but still I think the lessons learned from the failures is very crucial, then only the success.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that the case studies that will appear in the report hopefully will also provide some lessons from initiatives that perhaps were not so successful in various ways, rather than focusing purely on those which might demonstrate good practice. So I think the point you have just made is well taken. Thanks. I see it's now 10 minutes past 4, so I think it might be time to hand back to Viviana for the wrap up. But thank you everybody for what was a very informative and interactive session. And we weren't quite sure how it was going to work when we thought about it beforehand, but I think it's been a very worthwhile exercise, and thanks everybody for your contributions.
Thank you, Tim, and thank everyone for their inputs. I think this is an ongoing study, and I know that it will be very much enriched by all the discussions held today and all the points of view and everything. It gets things a little clearer in our minds. The next steps for this process is to conclude and then share the results from the JRA analysis, which I hope we will be able to finish soon and wrap up, to have clear insights on the entry points for future interventions or future efforts for strengthening agriculture innovation systems through capacity building and making a better use of the common framework to guide these processes. I think that one of the things that has come up in most of the discussions today is that the interventions at a local level with clear results that can be synthesized and monitored and then shared are very good evidence. But if we don't include all the institutional and organizational levels in these efforts, they will probably just simmer out and be just one more experience in the book, and not really elements for sustainability, for scaling up these initiatives, and to getting really everybody on board on moving forward through strengthening innovation frameworks and innovation systems in each of the countries. So with this, since we're way past the hour, I just thank everybody for their participation, for all their comments, and we will keep in touch with the results from our studies and all the further, the following activities within the output 3 of the DeSIRA project. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Viviana.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Well done.